Okay, so welcome to our next segment, and we're going to focus on specific things here. If I don't know if you would consider this technical, I think Toshi and I enjoy this kind of stuff because, well, because we were long-term seekers. I was a teacher. He's been in development with me and in training. It's just stuff that we talk about, and we put this stuff in the book too. So we encourage you to read the book. But we thought that for this workshop series, we wanted to really talk to you since we're here in person and show you things that we can't tell you from the book. So this just has to do with specific practices that don't reach repression. One is that, yes, we have a method to sell. We do. And that's how we make our living, Toshi and I do, and others here. But most of what I've taught through the years is free. Actually, the first and second dimension are out there on YouTube for free. We give a lot away for free, and you actually start the work for free. But what people will do is they'll get confused and they'll think we're saying that only this method is like this is the only way. But that's because they think that way. Like what I'm saying for us is that this is what worked for us. It's the only way that's worked for me. So I can only speak about my experience. And to speak about someone else's experience or to say that something else worked when it didn't, it's just repression. It's like false humility. Not all ego is braggadocio. Some of it is just a real false humility. And of course, we're trying to sell it so I can pay my bills. But what we're doing is really trying to help people. That's also here. It's real too. And this is how we're going to help people is if you can hear this not as this is the only way, but more as like this is trying to help you discern between things that do get to repression and don't, which is just good to know. And don't trust us, verify. If you don't know how to do the skills, go learn them, and then you can verify things for yourself. Once you verify things, the trust issue on authority can go away. If we have repression and we don't trust ourselves and we don't know how to, if I say something and you either agree or disagree, still, that's not the level that you want that to agree or disagree. You want that, if it's a truth, you want that embodied. And the only way you can do that is to verify if we're saying things that this is true in your own body. So we'll do a little bit of testing. Toshi, is there anything you want to say about when people say this is the only way, when we're trying to explain this is the only way that worked for us? We're trying to help other people who might find that too.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't. Yeah, I don't think I can add any more. Just like, I can't say any more than because that's our experience. But, we can be more than sure that this works for us. So what else can we do but to speak about that? And exactly like you say, if I was repressed, if I was an angry repressor, well, I'm still am to a little bit. But before I would have said, no, there's other things. Don't worry about it. We're just one of many. But I don't need to say that to get your love anymore. I can just be much more clear and set boundaries so that's the difference really. Because I couldn't say that. So
Well,
yeah.
I'm laughing because because I have my own experience with that. Because with anger repression, everything it has to kind of be equal, and nobody can be bigger or better because that's threatening. And of course, that stops us from actually discerning that maybe one thing does work better. And I didn't understand that too. And all my efforts to kind of keep peace and I was contributing to my own suffering. So let's get to the methods. Let's start with meditation. Okay, so Toshi and I are not experts on all the methods or the traditions. We're only experts on our own experience. I want to keep saying that. And so this is our experience with these different practices. Even though there's a lot of forms of meditation, different forms of Buddhist meditation, coming back to calm avoidance, allowing, witnessing, noticing, having a certain quality of attention towards things as they arise, even fully allowing thoughts and feelings because there is resistance, but not prompting anything up, as we said, and this is the first dimension practice. We wanted to break down the very specifics, and maybe you guys got it when Toshi was explaining it, because I thought that was a great way to explain it, Toshi, which is that when we're allowing, we're also holding back. But that's hard to know when you're sitting, when you agree, when you're sitting in meditation, that at the time that you're allowing something really painful, at the same time you're holding back. What would you say to people absent just giving them a test, which I could do in a second? What would you say to help them make sense of that since they're not aware of what they're holding back.
Yeah. And I could almost say your default, if you have emotional repression, your default state is holding back. Remember that, everyone. If everyone can just remember that. So even so, when you sit down to do something, your default setting is already holding something back. So, that's how, how we find it out through working with many, many hundreds of and thousands of hours of sessions and all those stuff. So it's then you can actually start to tune into the agenda we have, we kind of share about agenda ultimately, but you will not necessarily know the fact that you sit down to do a meditation because you don't want to feel something. But it's how to kind of start to notice that is but again I have to mention the mind again, because the mind itself, the thoughts that comes, they will feel true because we want them to feel true because I identify with them, you see? And that's how we keep believing the thoughts that comes. It's like, oh, I'm gonna do this, or I shouldn't do this. The simple thoughts like that. One will feel have more charge than other if you check your body, One will feel more true than the other. I could speak like this. And why is that? We can question that. And that's why we can start there if you want to. Why some thoughts feels more true than others? Like cabbage, Mickey Mouse, I'm not good enough, I'm unlovable. Which one of those thoughts feels more true or has reaction or charge? Then you can start to see, okay, it's not just like some random stuff that's happening like a wind blows, like the Nondual teachers say. We filtering things out. We only want to see things that we want to, sort of thing. So I kind of speak like that, but maybe you can give them some kind of,
That's good.
yeah,
That's
tests.
great. Because that's all we're doing is breaking down the specifics. Because when somebody's unconscious, they can't see so much about, like when you say there's two thoughts that arise. I'm thinking in meditation, those thoughts, they could be about doing something, but it could be also about like, I'm not good enough versus I think my vacuum is broken or something. And there's more energy on I'm not good enough. But the thing that people can't see and what we're trying to break down is when you're not aware of repression, it just looks like this is just arising in awareness because you don't have any consciousness of the fear that's buried, that's frozen. So it makes sense that you would just allow what you see because it's almost like, and they even say in some teachings, look how it comes out of nowhere because it seems to, it's like, here's this feeling and thought out of nowhere, out of awareness, but there's something missing there. Something produced it that's really unconscious and buried, and that's why it's there. And so the conditioning that you can't see and the emotions that you can't feel are actually doing this. I have to believe I'm not good enough. But you can't hear that part. There's a have to, a need under it. So as Toshi and I are going to talk about is that these needs are emotional needs coming straight from the repression of emotion. So like needing safety, needing love and approval. But like when that comes up, I'm not good enough, we're not only not aware, speaking of how on a spiritual path, we're not aware of needs, we're not aware of the need creating that. We're not even aware that we have to believe it when we're in meditation. We can't see any of that. And that's how much of a bypass it is, because then we'll think that things are just arising to awareness. And this is a spiritual thing. The things are just, of course they are, but not for no reason. They're rising for specific reasons. I'm not good enough keeps us specifically safe from some emotion or emotions that we've buried. That's what I was going to add to it. Anything else on just meditation for you, Kuma?
Yeah, and exactly just to follow on to what you're saying. So if things are rising up for reasons, like I'm not good enough, I need to clean the vacuum, I need to go and cook now, they're different, but different things has different charges. But some technique have way to even dismisses that, like a neti practice, not this, not that, maybe. So when things arises, you say, that's not me, that's not me. Just like you're kind of making them the same thing as like this is just a thought. When his thoughts has things inside them that really let us know that I have to believe this but not believe this. But we just whitewash, or I don't know how else to say it, we just make them one thing that's arising, to say, "No, I'm not this, I'm not that. But this has more meaning than this. And your body is reacting to this thought more than this. So why you say this, And that's another way to make everything the same, flat, everything's equal, very safe there. It's fully connected to how we want to make everything flat and just nothing poking out. because that's almost like the conditioning knows that or something that you don't want to kind of rock the boat sort of thing, Yeah.
Okay, can I piggyback on that? Because it's like so with repression, which is resistance, when something big comes up, we want to turn away from it. That's what happens when we have that need for safety. And yet what Toshi's saying is we want to turn towards it and treat it differently because it's there and there's more energy for a reason, which is what we would say is there's the frozen fears with it. The sense of separation is tied to that if you trust your body and not just the mind. So, but what I'm trying to say is if you have a continuous practice of just allowing everything equally, that's what Toshi was saying. Or that's how I would say it. It's like everything is just equal. See, there's the repression again. Everything is equal, but it's not true.
Mm.
Your plumber can help you fix your sink, but your neighbor can't. Not everyone or everything is equal. Everything is different. And if you trust it, you'll feel that like this story is different than that one. And you trust your body then. And then if you go in, you'll see, well, when you do KI, that you were missing something in meditation. We all do, or sitting as awareness. You can't see that
Mm.
driver right under that thing that's coming up. So,
Mm.
and so what can you do with it other than just allow it, right? And if you allow all things
Mm.
equally, I think what Toshi is saying is then, or what I would say is if you allow all those things equally, and you don't investigate the things with energy on it, that's the bypass. Because then in that way, the repression never really got touched and the allowing of everything equally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And some of you who has a non-dual background might say, well, that's identification. You're identifying with thoughts that's coming up. Don't do that. I mean, I've been taught to do that by non-dual teachers. Just allow, see things, don't identify, don't make anything out of it. But remember, everybody, this bit, you're already identified with it. Do not forget that. That's why it's coming up. That's why it has charge on it. So by looking at it and investigating it, you're not more identified with it. You're just becoming conscious and aware that you're becoming identified with it. So do you see the difference? The subtlety of that is like people say, some of us say, are we, Toshi, doing care? Are you gonna more make it more real, more identified with these issues or the trauma or the things that I have already in my body? It's like, no, you're already identified with it. You just don't know about it. But what we're doing is making those unconscious things conscious. That's all we're doing. But how can we do that when we keep ignoring all those things that is coming up for you to almost be looked at? So you could almost say, completely opposite way, these things that need to be looked at is queuing up for you to be looked at, you could say, you know?
Totally.
But we just keep dismissing them. So yeah, I
Yeah.
just wanted to, yeah.
No, it's beautiful. We're so innocent of it in one sense, but it just keeps happening. I was going to say that that led me to well to other practices. So it's not just meditation, and
Mm,
a lot of my meditation, so to speak, was just throughout the day. I don't know if it was through you. I used to teach this short moments of awareness repeated many times become automatic. It's an old Dzogchen thing. Okay, so let's talk about those things where you try to integrate the recognition of presence throughout your day, like living meditation, and then allowing things to come and go. So I don't want what we're doing here just to be a critique, even though the book, it really is a critique. It's a loving critique of the non-dual bypass, of non-duality
yeah.
and awakening. But we want to give people like helpful ways, solutions instead of just the critique. And so are we saying that witnessing has no place? I mean, Toshi, you can respond to this in terms of just sitting and allowing things. I'm not saying that because you can't really feel the repression throughout the day. So the things that you're witnessing when you're not doing repression inquiry are being produced by the frozen fear of the repression. So the best thing to do if you can't do inquiry is allow, just allow. But
Mm,
really, it's about getting to the repression that's creating it and coming back to inquiry. So if people are listening, you're listening because you have access to something that nobody else has out. This workshop, nobody else can watch it unless they're actually doing the work with us. So remember when you learn the safety net, you're learning how to process repression throughout the day in different times. And the rest of the days can be of the time is can just be regulating and allowing. I think it gets integrated here is what we're saying. What would you say, or what do you say to people that you mentor, Toshi, in terms?
yeah, so I just want something that came to me, we think we're allowing things, but we can't really, if we can't fully allow things anyway. That's what we do in the work, because we cannot fully allow things, but we kind of pretend we're allowing things. by just only seeing things that we want to see. And you could see it this way too. And yeah, so yeah, I forgot what you asked me about actually.
Well, I was going to ask you because I think we both agree with that. But like when you're mentoring people who have a lot of suffering coming, and they can't do repression inquiry all the time, do you tell them, yeah, sure, allow it if you're not doing repression inquiry because that's kind of the best you can do when you're not getting to repression?
Exactly.
Yeah, what do you say about that?
Yeah, and just being, I think people who watch these videos might be already have a spiritual background, but we work with people who has no background, anything like this before. So some people don't even know thoughts are thoughts, or you can even observe thoughts or be with sensations. So, you can start, and that's already good enough. But what we're saying is you cannot stop there. It's all, if you're not getting to depression, it's always going to be a bypass. But if you have to, everyone have to start somewhere, and it's a journey into it. So yes, if you can allow it, and there's many insights and beautiful things can happen, and we can become a lot conscious than before by just allowing, seeing your thoughts and netting all the stuff that feels like I'm really dissing those things, but it's where I had to come from too. All of us had to actually realize that, oh wow, there's a thought and there's a sensations. Now I'm actually here and now. So if I'm here and now, is there such a thing as Toshi? Is there? I don't know. There's sensations of body. There's all these things you can do. It's a good investigation you can do to tune into what's really here about awareness and all of that. But to the conditioning, they're just thoughts and ideas. That's and it only knows is to grab it so that you can use it to keep the very image. That's what we pointed to. So none of the things are necessarily good or bad here. That's just like anything, not just within
Yeah.
spirituality. All of it. So yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
like to do.
that's a good point there because we're going to go into other practices. Is that it's not good or bad. That's so important because people with when you have repression, that's what creates the dualistic mind. That's like good or bad to stay safe.
Mm.
But we're not saying that. And if you can just sit and hear us from a different place, even if it's from awareness, what we're saying is that it's not good or bad. It's that is this particular practice being driven by repression, or is it just trying to take care of the visible effects of it? And what do you want to know? See, it's about knowing that. And so I would say, in terms of breathing, that's where I wanted to go. Okay, so we're definitely not experts in breathing. I used to own a treatment center or treatment centers, mental health centers, addiction treatment centers, where certain breathing techniques, well, we did a bunch of different ones actually, from breath of fire to more calming breathing to breathing that would help kind of dislodge or move depression the whole time. So I was doing these and other people were, and nobody was really reporting. People were reporting states or changes at times and regulation of their nervous system. But I never saw what we see now, which is where suffering really goes away. But look, there are methods out there that purport to do that. You go and decide. Here's what I'm going to say. It's the same premise. It's not good or bad. It's that when you're buying into a method, you really want to be sure that it's connected to repression. You don't want to leave it to chance. And if it doesn't look like it gets to repression, why leave that to chance when repression is such a major factor in suffering? If you really understand that it really is a driver of suffering and you're doing a breathing technique, but in nowhere in there do you feel any anger or anything like it or hurt, and just think about doing methods that are in isolation away from people anyway, because our suffering is starts in relationship and intergenerational trauma. So that's where our triggers and everything are. And here we are sitting and breathing. You can almost see that's a being that's trying to regulate trauma, trying to feel okay. But see, our real freedom is in relationship, and you can't triggers. Just you trying to protect yourself. And of course, in life and in real life, we want to respond. We want to be able to respond in relationship and not suffer. So how do you use that? You want to be able to use your methods in life, is what I say. And even though you can't do inquiry like this when you're with people, what this work does, and what I think every method should do, it gives you insight as to why that suffering is coming up. That's why I wanted to say is that certainly there's insight with breathing work, but it should be the kind of insight that shows you the root of your suffering and shows you where it's coming from. Otherwise, that remains unconscious. So would you say that, what's the litmus test for you on some of these practices in terms of, without learning them and becoming an expert on them, what do you think a good litmus test is for people in terms of whether something is missing repression, breathing, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't found anything that really gets to emotion, I mean, emotional repression per se. So it's hard to say, if you're not really getting to the third dimension, what we call it. So this is something that I can actually talk about too. I did some just because you get into, let's say I'm an anger repressor and you're an anger repressor. Just because you got to feel and express the anger in the practice, that doesn't mean you're doing repression work. And I want to be really clear about this. Yes, this is part of what we do, but we must work on the fear of the anger. So there's lots of like a somatic work I've done before where you get in touch with your anger somehow by, I don't know, some inquiry, and you get to feel it. Because of course, it's bubbling underneath it. I've got a whole tank full of repressed anger that I carry around all my life. There's a
Yeah.
way to tap into that, and I get really angry and I start screaming and I start smashing things up, and it feels great. But that's not repression work because that tank's gonna be filled up again. So it's not about just feeling and expressing in a moment that you think I want to. And that's not really anger anyway. It's repressed anger. It's mixed with fear. So you're really feeling the fear of the anger too. And it's yes, of course, it's part of, just like we've talking about, it's part of the journey maybe to be able to get in touch with your varied emotions. But if you stop there, it's the same thing. If you're not getting to the fear of emotion, buried, while we buried in things, it's not repression work. So I just want to stress that yes, there's many emotional release work, but it's not about releasing because that you have to keep releasing those, because when you start to experience clean anger, when we start to do our work, it doesn't have to be this pressurized, explosive, violent, uncontrollableness that you associate with anger, because that's the reason why you repress them because it's dangerous and scary. But when you release the repressed anger, when you start to feel the clean anger, like boundary, like saying yes, like saying no, I don't like you, that clear, I don't know, ownership, all of that is very different. But the mind can comprehend that at all, and that's that we need to talk about this a little bit sometimes too, of how we start to really meet ourselves fully from zero, from the beginning. Because we repress anger, but we don't really know what anger really is. Because I've never experienced it. I only know the fear of the anger unconsciously. So even if you working with anger, I can be angry at this place, and I can be, but you're just doing the way that you want to do it in a safe way, you know. But the fear is right there to keep doing that. So that might reinforce his anger repression even more. And you might become this horrible angry person, but you can't fully allow the anger to spontaneously come and go because that's what's really scary. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of explain that a little bit too about some modalities that touches emotions. But if you're not getting into the fear of it and why and all these unconscious programs, it's really just another thing that we're talking about, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that applies to everything. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I'm not an expert on breathing. And I think that people, if you keep an open mind, like if you listen to what Toshi said, that's my litmus test in a way, because certain techniques can relieve suffering temporarily. That can happen and leave a more expansive sense of self and all that. But if it doesn't translate to authenticity and in relationship and really feeling and expressing what's true, because that's very self-regulating. And when you do the deep work, you don't have a lot of that stuff that you have to pull away from people to look at because you're processing in relationship the needs that appear as triggers and the contraction and all this, that less and less do you need spiritual practices of any kind to pull away to regulate the suffering when you're getting to the root of it. And you're self-regulating by transformation and not coming over here and doing anything breathing or otherwise. I mean, yes, you will along the way, of course, because you have to. We have to regulate our system. In some moment, maybe you can't go into the anger or something and you just have to breathe. You breathe, you do something. But what we want you to do here is to become really good at making discriminations. And anger repressors and hurt repressors often aren't good at boundaries and things like this, of discriminations between, well, am I using something just to stay safe Or is this leading to the root of suffering? Here's one way you can trust it, is go into your body. And I want you to imagine you're doing KI, and what you're doing KI on is your dominant repression. So you're imagining, like, if you're a hurt repressor or sadness, you're working towards crying with people. It says to work towards expressing anger at people. And just imagine that for a second and say, I don't stay safe by expressing anger to people or processing buried anger. And trust your body. How would that keep you safe if that's the thing that's most scary? It doesn't. You don't get anything out of it. In fact, if you look, if you really, I'll take you through it if you work with me, but we don't get anything out of our own authenticity. We're not trying to get our needs met in that way. When we know, for example, on our spiritual path, that we're going towards this practice because it keeps us safe from this. Like we learn that so that we don't keep going to practices that keep us off inauthentic and suffering in relationship. That's what I mean. So if you go into your body and you say, it's safe to process buried emotions or to do KI, it's probably going to be a no. But trust that, because that's what Toshi's saying. If we go away from our resistance, that's our suffering, we're bypassing. But if it really doesn't feel safe to do that work, now go to a breathing or a meditation thing that's not like that. Pull that up and forget the buried emotions and just say it's safe to do that. And see if you have as much resistance to something like that from the body level as you do to processing buried emotions. You might have to go back and forth. And that's self-trust, because you're seeing what you're most afraid of. You're seeing that you're very afraid of anger, very afraid of that. Maybe you already know that, or hurt or sadness that you've buried, but not so afraid of breathing to work through the issues. But repression is the root of suffering. So if you go over here to something that's safer, that's being driven by the repression, but it's not happening in your conscious knowledge. It's just driven down here. I mean, if you want to, a real simple way of explaining that is like, I can walk through the park with my grandkids, and the body says, the mind and body's like, yes. Like, well, okay, I can process my buried emotions so I can be an even better grandfather. No, it's like, because the system's taking care of us. And if we can really trust that with every method, I mean, I was staying safe by teaching presence. I'll just share that at admission. I was staying safe in my nervous system, in my conditioning, by constantly pointing to things like breathing, but not exactly, that were bringing people to this sense of, okay, being here now, even open, expansive, things clearing, see? And not understanding that, again, below the surface, needs were met in that and bypassed. Anything you want to say about just that little test that I put out there, that way of explaining it?
No, that's a great test. So it's about calibrating, isn't it? Because it's, to check. It's a really good way for people to actually get to know their body and how their body reacts. If you're not used to feeling something in your body, you might miss certain reactions when the no that says, I want to do KI. It's like, no. So you want to get used to feeling that, because, you try with something else. Like, I can go and eat this now. It's like, yeah. So that's what, Scott's pointed to. It's really, so use that to actually get to know your body too. So yeah, but that's it for me. But yeah.
Thank you, Toshi. And any other practices? I know you probably didn't do a lot of breathing. I mean, what I would say to everybody is, what I'm trying to explain to people is, you can do other things with KI, but you have to contend with the fact that your body's driving everything. Because otherwise, when your mind makes decisions, you're always staying safe.
Exactly. Yeah. And
Yeah.
breathing is interesting. Even, we learn to take a deep breath to just calm ourselves anyway. And every time we do that, we can even question that. We naturally go, okay, when something uncomfortable feeling comes up, we just naturally just take a deep breath to kind of regulate ourselves, which is not a bad thing. We're not saying that's how we cope, how we have to regulate our nervous system. But, while we do that, we have to check. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to ask you about, or just let's talk about um, the practice of self-inquiry, which I don't know how much you did of that. Did you do much of that, and including neti, like if things arise to awareness, seeing that each arising comes in awareness, but no single arising is me. Even if it has a lot of energy on it, it comes and goes, and not me, natty natty, which was a version, which is really what my first inquiries were about. Living inquiries were like a somatic version of seeing through that sense of self inquiry. And see what you say. That what I've discovered is again, the reason that it's coming up is to keep one safe from the buried emotions and get love and approval. And you can't see that until you specifically prompt those things up. Like you can't, like when you're investigating self, it doesn't even matter if you look at everything. And people do, and I've seen it, it's like exhausting in one sense. Like there are definitely teachings and communities like we were just showing people no matter what arises, it's not you, it's coming and going. But then it ignores a basic premise. Why is so much fucking shit arising, excuse my language, that we don't know how to investigate? And so it's exhausting because, yeah, everything comes and goes. That's true. And you see that. And you can even shift to seeing, okay, I'm the awareness and everything comes and goes. So the awareness is what I am. This is not me. But then many people who did that still suffered and came here later because seeing through that self, again, there's roots in the body. And even if you do self inquiry, see what your thoughts come here. If you don't get to the roots, my experience was that you can walk around a lot thinking there is nobody there because you've done so much witnessing to see at least the things at the tip have gotten quieter and quieter. And yet, I guess we're coming back to the same place as the finder syndrome, because if you keep doing that, you miss the fact that buried emotions create disease and chronic pain. That's one of the things. But what would you say about somatic self-inquiry or inquiry that,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think, yeah, I did some of that, like, who am I? And that kind of stuff, it's just like, you sit with it. But I just really think in any self-inquiry cannot be asking question. It has to be reversed. It has to be challenged. Because if I say, who am I? Just a huge space for the mind to be able to say whatever it wants. But when you say, I'm nobody, you might get a reaction because ego has to always, program has to always validate itself. And that's really foundation of the KI in some ways. If you argue with it, it's gonna speak back because that's what it's believing. And then to get something that's breathing out, you have to see as thoughts, you have to kind of poke with it. Like the poke the bear, as we say, because and self-inquiry without really poking just doesn't work because you're only gonna hear what the repression wants you to tell you. So you just kind of, yes, you feel like you're finding more out, but it's still a story and identities of why this happened to me, why this, that, blah, blah, blah. Yes, it's relevant, but you can go round and round and round. But if you start to reverse things or say the opposite, see how the conditioning wants to argue with that and say otherwise, because there's an agenda to believe in that. And what is the agenda? So you don't have to feel something. And yeah, and how do we get to things that we believe in unconsciously? You can't, because thoughts are thoughts. As soon as you believe something, you can't see as thoughts anymore. You grab it, you believe it, it's true. I can't see it. I will defend it. So how do we get out something that we don't see it? Because we believe it, we can't see it as thought. It's true. I'm not good enough. I'm unlovable. Yes, I know the feeling about I'm unlovable, but that's all I know. So how do I see the thought parts of that? It will not come up unless you argue and say, I am lovable. Everyone loves me. Then it's like, no, you're not, because this happens, then you're kind of into your unconsciousness, you see. Because otherwise, if when you believe it, you can't see it, you'll just identify with it. You're fully with that whole thing. So yeah,
that's amazing.
yeah.
That's subtle stuff, isn't it? That's really subtle because what I'm thinking is, like, for example, someone who represses anger, if you keep allowing things and it just gets quieter and more peaceful, it looks like that's it. It's like also that's safe for anger repressor. So that state of like, well, things have come and gone and it's quieter is so seductive and conditions us to think that that's what realization is. Even if a teacher says like, no, peace is not it. But we can't, that's not enough to overcome a lifetime of repressing anger, that peace is not it. That's our trauma response. So somehow when we're witnessing, wow, how do you I mean, how do you overcome that without somatic testing or reverse inquiry, like you just said? Because that's what somatic
Exactly.
testing is, and I guess I'll say this is if you were like me and you mistook the peace of presence for realization because of anger repression, you can really challenge yourself, like Toshi's saying. You can say, like, oh, well, here's a good one. Um, in terms of like, well, people wake up and to awareness and still stuff's coming through. Like, okay, that's probably true because if suffering hasn't ended, there's probably suffering coming through. If you can pull anything up and just see this as something that you would normally witness, whatever it is, can you pull a story up, anyone, or a situation where you feel it in your body? And this is, again, something that you might just allow or question in inquiry, but this time as you have it up, say, I don't stay safe by believing this. I don't stay safe by believing this. And trust your body. Like whatever it is, that would normally just come and go. This time you pull it there and you say, I don't get love. Say that too. Maybe it's like I'm a loser, I'll never get there. And there that comes up. And say, I don't get love out of believing that, and just trust your body or stay safe. That's just a test. But if you find the response, then it's just the realization can go much deeper. That's what I want to say than just sitting there and allowing or even doing self-inquiry. Because even with self-inquiry, it's not that much different than just first dimension, really. Even if you prompt things up, because in first dimension, we're just allowing things to come and go. And we still miss the repression. We're still safe. And then in second dimension, we keep prompting things up, but we still miss the repression. So I guess what I want to say with this is the need for peace is really a need for safety. If you knew, if you would do that inquiry more often, you would say, I don't stay safe by believing this. You would see that why you like the peace, why, what you're, well, you won't know what you're staying safe from until you do repression inquiry, but you'll see that you get something out of it. That's what it is. So self-inquiry on things that you're getting something out of should be suspect on its face. Think about it. It's just
Yeah.
like meditation on things that you're creating. If you had enough consciousness, you would see that that's suspect on its face to be questioning things that my system is producing so that my childhood needs are met. If you had that kind of consciousness, you would know that that's not the answers to question identities that were there to protect us from the beginning. Get to the root. That's what I want to say.
Yeah. And if you're getting your needs met through those practices, you start to develop a compulsion towards it. That's something you can notice too. Because that's what, because you can't really have a compulsion towards KI, really. I mean, you can do, but you see what I mean? Yes, if you're not doing KI properly and you're getting your needs met there, you might have that, but it becomes a regular, how do you say, soothing system, or like, just something that you do. And you can kind of tune into that to kind of see, oh, that's what happens if you're not getting to your repressed emotions, then it becomes compulsive, that's only will stay there as long as but then again, what happens with the pleasure pain cycle? The pain will follow, the suffering will follow. So yeah, we only know by suffering really, but yeah, that's it.
The other thing I want to mention before we go, since we're talking about specific practices, and we've only covered a few, and again, people have to discern for themselves, like learn how to do KI and see whether are you doing this practice to stay safe or whatever we were showing you. You really do want to trust yourself. But let us get you started on another investigation, which is shadow work, because that's another practice. So I'm
Mm.
pro and con that because Ken Wilber says the shadows come from repression, and we see that here. We see that what a shadow is like something is too beautiful or too ugly about me, so I repress it. It's connected usually to buried emotions, to emotions that I can't express. And so then that gets created. There's our duality. A lot of our duality is in shadows. So shadow work gets missed in spirituality, but then a lot of like the more sophisticated non-dual teachings will bring it in at the same time without seeing where that comes from. For example, the authority shadow. So this is why a lot of people, I think, can't be free because they don't trust authority and teachers, but they don't know where that comes from. We can't trust ourselves and our own emotions. So we can't trust others. It's just how it shadows itself out. But if you do shadow work to like own that, like some shadow work processes, like, oh, I'm my own authority. You be your own authority. That's too where you think they're the authority, and somehow through the process, I'm the authority. But if you could see how safe you're staying from that ultimately, because to be your own authority, you would feel and express all of your emotions. You would know yourself clearly. You wouldn't be suffering in the same way. And that's just another example of where people can do something that looks like it's like close but no cigar, because you can feel better and the shadows can get quieter, but you still have the repression that either creates more shadows or other forms of suffering. Anything you want to say about shadows?
Yeah, I mean, shadows, you can really see how you get triggered the fact that you can't be that way. So if you see someone behaving in a way that you don't like, you can just say, I can be like this. It's like, no, it's straight away. It's like you really get to see what you're projecting out that way. But again, if you're not getting to why you're doing that, it's the same thing. So yeah, it's a great, yeah, yeah. So it's the same thing really. But it's a great way into to your repression work anyway. If you're combining it with repression work, it's one of the best ways to,
It is.
because it's really relational too. So yeah.
It is. So I guess we'll leave it at that. If there's any practices that people are doing, because there's so many practices out there, I'm trying to give people a litmus test. Remember, first of all, that you don't have to give up your practice if you come here. Your system probably won't. Include it, but start finding out where you're seeking safety in your life. For example, when I was managing chronic pain, even though I had developed anger repression inquiry, which was taking the pain away, it didn't go all at once because I was resisting that kind of work. So I had to continue managing the pain in different ways. And that's a way of like doing a specific practice or a method that gives me relief, but doesn't get to the root. So it's just all part of it. But at some point, if you really want to get to the deeper transformation, you have to make discernments between this practice and that practice because your body is already doing it. Your body's already seeking safety. If you're not conscious of it, it'll just keep you doing that and keep you away from the repression.
Yeah.
Thanks, Toshi. We'll invite them to the next segment. Thanks everyone for checking in on our next segment. Well, we're going to surprise you and tell you what it is.
Yeah. Thank you.